The warning came too late. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the patrol ship Defiant, watching the emergency transmission flicker and die. The face of Colony Director Hassan had filled the screen for only 3 seconds. Behind him, the sky had been burning. His mouth had opened to scream something, but the signal cut before any words could reach her. That was 6 hours ago. Now the Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler's gate system, and Sarah's blood turned to ice. The colony was gone. Where New Shanghai should have been, there was only a glowing crater of melted rock. The orbital stations were debris fields, spreading slowly through space like metallic confetti. Evacuation ships floated dead in the black, their hulls torn open by weapons fire. Sarah had been to Kepler's gate 3 months ago. She had walked through parks where children played. She had eaten dinner with families who called this place home. 3.2 million people had lived here. Now there was only silence and ash. "Captain, I'm picking up a lifeboat signal," Lieutenant Park said from his station. His voice shook. The young officer had family on Kepler's gate. Had family. Past tense now. "Bring us alongside," Sarah ordered. "Prepare the rescue team." They found 12 survivors in the lifeboat, 12 people out of millions. Most were in shock, staring at nothing with empty eyes. One man kept mumbling about the sky turning red. A woman held a child's shoe and wouldn't let go. The medics took them to the infirmary. All except one. Marcus Webb refused the stretcher. He was 30 years old, covered in burns and dried blood. He had been a teacher at the Colony University. Now he stood in the Defiance corridor and gripped Sarah's arm with surprising strength. "They came without warning," Marcus said. His eyes were wild, desperate to make someone understand. No demands. No communication. Just ships dropping out of nowhere and opening fire. The defense satellites tried to fight back, but their weapons just bounced off. It wasn't even a battle. It was extermination. Sarah had to force herself to look at him. Who were they? Did you see any markings? The Vricks. Marcus spat the word like poison. I saw their insignia when they fired on the evacuation ships. They were laughing. "Admiral." I could see them through the viewport of my transport before we crashed. They were laughing. Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. The Vricks' sovereignty. One of the major powers of the galaxy. Old and arrogant and strong. And humanity was none of those things. Humanity had barely been in space for a century. They were the newcomers, the primitives, tolerated by the older species but never respected. "Go to the infirmary," Sarah told Marcus gently. "We'll get you home. I promise." After he left, she stood alone in the corridor for a long time. Then she went back to the bridge and sent the report to Earth Command. The words felt inadequate. How do you describe the death of a world? How do you explain that millions of souls had been snuffed out like candle flames? The response came 18 hours later. Earth Command ordered her to document everything and return home immediately. They also sent a second message, encrypted for her eyes only. The message was brief. "Don't start a war we can't win." Sarah looked at the ruins of Kepler's gate floating on her view screen. Too late, she thought. The war already started. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks. Sarah spent that time reviewing every scrap of sensor data from the attack. The Vricks had used 12 warships, each one larger than anything in humanity's fleet. Their weapons had melted through planetary shields like they weren't even there. The colony's defenses had killed exactly 0 enemy ships. It hadn't been a battle. It had been pest control. When the Defiant finally reached Earth orbit, Sarah was summoned immediately to Geneva. The United Earth Council met in emergency session. Representatives from every nation sat in the great circular chamber, their faces grim. Sarah stood in the center and showed them what she had seen. When the images of the burning colony appeared on the holographic displays, several representatives looked away. One woman started crying silently. Ambassador David Okonkwo stood to speak. He was humanity's voice to the Galactic Council, a job that had aged him 10 years in 5. "I've already filed a formal protest with the Council," he said. "I demanded an immediate investigation and sanctions against the Vrix sovereignty." "What did they say?" asked Secretary General Martinez. Okonkwo's jaw tightened. "They offered their sympathies. They called it an unfortunate incident. They suggested that perhaps the colony had accidentally violated Vrix territorial claims." He paused, and his voice filled with bitter anger. "They will do nothing. The Vrix are too powerful. Humanity is too weak. That's the reality." The chamber erupted in shouting. Some demanded retaliation. Others argued for caution. A few suggested abandoning the outer colonies entirely, pulling everyone back to Earth where they could be protected. Sarah listened to them argue and felt that cold, hard thing in her chest grow larger. Finally, the Secretary General asked her directly, "Admiral Chen, in your professional opinion, could we win a war against the Vrix?" Sarah thought about the sensor readings. She thought about the 12 warships that had destroyed a colony in less than an hour. She thought about Marcus Webb's eyes and the woman who wouldn't let go of a dead child's shoe. "Not today," she said. "But wars aren't won or lost in a day." The council session ended without any real decisions. Earth would file protests. They would ask for justice. They would hope the galaxy would care. But Sarah knew the truth. The galaxy didn't care. To the older species, humanity was barely worth noticing. They were insects in a universe of giants. 3 days later, Sarah received new orders. She was promoted to Fleet Marshal and given command of Earth's entire military space program. The orders came with unlimited authority and a blank check. The message from the Council was clear without saying it directly. Get us ready for war. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Hassan's face on that dying transmission. She kept thinking about the parks where children used to play, now turned to radioactive glass. She thought about 3.2 million people who had gone to sleep thinking they were safe, only to wake up to fire raining from the sky. She went to her window and looked down at Earth. The planet turned slowly below her station, blue and green and peaceful. Lights sparkled across the night side where cities sprawled. 7 billion people lived down there, going about their lives, most of them not even knowing what had happened at Kepler's gate. Sarah pressed her hand against the cold glass. She made a promise then, not to the Council or to Earth Command, but to the dead, to Hassan and his colony, to the children who had played in those parks, to Marcus Webb's students who would never finish their education. "They think we're weak," she whispered. "They think we'll forgive and forget. They think they can slaughter our people and we'll just accept it because we're afraid." She looked up at the stars beyond Earth, at the vast darkness where the Vrix waited, confident in their power and their safety. "They're wrong," Sarah said. "We'll show them what humanity does to monsters." In the medical bay, Marcus Webb lay awake in his bed, unable to sleep. His burns were healing, but the wounds inside ran deeper. He could still hear the screaming. He could still see the ships exploding. He stared at the ceiling and clenched his fists until his nails drew blood. Somewhere out there, the people who had done this were sleeping peacefully. They probably didn't even remember the name of the colony they had destroyed. It meant nothing to them. Marcus closed his eyes and made his own promise to the dead. He would live, he would heal, and someday, somehow, he would make them remember. The Vrix had made their greatest mistake. They had shown humanity that the galaxy was not fair, that mercy was weakness, that only the strong survived. Humanity would learn that lesson well. 5 years had changed everything. Marcus Webb stood at the viewport of the training station and watched the construction yards below. Ships, hundreds of them, thousands. They stretched away in neat rows like soldiers on parade, their hulls gleaming under the work lights. Welding torches sparkled like distant stars as construction crews worked around the clock. The yards never stopped. They couldn't afford to stop. Impressive, isn't it? Admiral Chen appeared beside him. She looked older now, her hair more gray than black, her face lined with the weight of what she carried. 2 years ago, this station didn't even exist. Now we're building a ship every 16 hours. Marcus nodded slowly. He wore a captain's uniform now, though he still couldn't quite believe it. 5 years ago, he had been a teacher. Now he commanded a destroyer, called the Vengeance. The name wasn't subtle, but nobody was interested in subtlety anymore. "How many ships do we have now?" he asked. 4,312 combat-ready vessels, Chen replied. Another 800 in final construction, not counting the support ships, transports, and supply chain. She paused. It's still not enough. Will it ever be enough? Chen turned to look at him. Her eyes were hard now, harder than they had been 5 years ago. The massacre at Kepler's Gate had done that. It had hardened all of them. The Vrix have 20,000 warships, but they're spread across half the galaxy, maintaining their empire. They're comfortable, complacent. They still think we're not a threat. Good, Marcus said quietly. Let them think that. Below them, another ship rolled out of the construction bay. This one was enormous, bigger than anything humanity had built before. The Hellstorm class dreadnought. The engineers had designed it for one purpose only: to kill Vrix ships. Every weapon system, every armor plate, every power conduit was optimized to fight the enemy that had destroyed Kepler's Gate. How many of those do we have? Marcus asked, pointing at the dreadnought. 47. We're building 6 more every month. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They won't be laughing anymore. 47. 47. 47. The training had been brutal. After the massacre, Earth's military had thrown out every old assumption about space warfare. They studied the Vrix tactics from the sensor logs Sarah's ship had captured. They analyzed every weakness, every pattern, every mistake, and they learned. More importantly, they learned from their own nature. Humans were good at killing. Humanity's history was written in blood and fire. For centuries, they had perfected the art of war against each other. Now they turned all that experience outward. The Galactic Council called their new tactics barbaric. Humanity called them effective. Marcus remembered his first briefing on the new doctrine. The instructor, a scarred veteran named Colonel Ross, had stood before the class of new officers and said something that still echoed in Marcus's mind. Every other species in the galaxy fights according to rules, honor codes, laws of warfare. The Vrix respect those rules because it makes them comfortable. We're going to teach them what happens when the rules don't apply. Rioran. The other species used energy shields and stood off at long range, trading fire in predictable patterns. Humans packed their ships with Marines and crashed them into enemy vessels for boarding actions. The other species treated their ships as sacred and valuable. Humans built cheap, fast attack boats loaded with explosives and programmed to ram enemy capital ships. The other species tried to minimize casualties. Humans calculated exactly how many lives a target was worth and paid the price without hesitation. It wasn't honorable. It wasn't clean. But it worked. How's your crew? Chen asked. Ready, Marcus said. Angry. Most of them lost someone at Kepler's Gate, or at one of the other colonies the Vrix hit after. In the 5 years since the massacre, the Vrix had struck 4 more human colonies. Smaller attacks, testing Earth's response. Each time, humanity had filed protests with the Galactic Council. Each time, the Council had done nothing. The Vrix War Prime Zelthak had even given an interview to a galactic news network, dismissing human complaints as the whining of primitives who didn't understand their place in the cosmic order. That interview had been played on every screen across Earth. Billions of humans had watched Zelthak laugh while discussing the regrettable incidents at the colonies. His exact words had been, "Perhaps they will learn that there are consequences for occupying space that doesn't belong to them." Marcus had watched that interview 5 times. He had memorized every word. He kept Zelthok's face in his mind as motivation during the 18-hour training days, during the endless drills, during the nights when the nightmares woke him screaming. "The fleet assembly is scheduled for next week," Chen said. "Every ship we have, gathered above Earth. The final review before we deploy. And then we go to war." Chen turned back to the viewport. Below, the ships continued their silent construction, growing like a metal forest. "We've been at war for 5 years, Marcus. We just haven't been fighting yet. That changes soon." The fleet assembly was the most impressive thing Marcus had ever seen. Every warship in Earth's arsenal gathered in high orbit, organized by class and function. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, carriers, and the massive Hellstorm dreadnoughts. The smallest vessels were barely larger than atmospheric fighters. The largest were mobile fortresses that could crack a moon. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the formation take shape. His tactical officer kept calling out numbers as more ships arrived through the designated transit points. 4,000. 4,000. 500. 5,000. When the last ship arrived and took its position, the formation stretched from horizon to horizon. From the surface of Earth, it would look like a second sky had appeared. A sky made of metal and weapons and human determination. The civilian news networks broadcast images around the world. In cities and villages, in orbit stations, and underground bunkers, humans stopped to watch their fleet. Some people cheered. Some wept. All of them remembered Kepler's Gate. Chen broadcast from the flagship Remembrance, her face appearing on every screen in the fleet. 5 years ago, the Vreich's sovereignty came to Kepler's Gate. They murdered 3.2 million of our people. They did it without warning, without mercy, and without consequence. They thought we would accept it. They thought we would be afraid. They thought we were weak. She paused, and Marcus saw the cold fury in her eyes that had been building for 5 years. They were wrong. Today, we show them the price of their mistake. Today, humanity marches, and we march with a sky of Battlefleet behind us. The transmission ended. The orders went out. The fleet began to move. Not everyone agreed with what was happening. On Earth, protests had erupted in major cities. Peace activists argued that humanity was becoming what they hated. Philosophers debated whether revenge was justice or just another form of evil. Religious leaders called for forgiveness and mercy. But the fleet moved anyway, carrying with it the will of billions who remembered the burning sky above Kepler's Gate. The debate could continue. The philosophers could argue. But out in the darkness, beyond Earth's comfortable gravity well, the Vreichs were waiting. And they would learn that humanity did not forget. Marcus checked his crew status reports. Every station showed green. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Kara Osei, looked up from her console. She had lost her parents and 2 brothers at Kepler's Gate. "All weapons systems ready, Captain. Targeting protocols loaded." 1. Good. Marcus brought up the navigation display. Their target was a Vreich's listening post in the outer territories, 3 weeks away at maximum speed. A small target for the opening move. But Chen had been clear about the strategy. They would start at the edges and work their way inward, cutting away the Vreich's territory piece by piece. "Captain," his communications officer called. "Receiving final authorization from Fleet Command. We're cleared to engage enemy forces on contact. Rules of engagement are unrestricted." Marcus understood what that meant. No warnings. No offers to surrender. The Vreichs had written those rules when they massacred Kepler's Gate. Humanity was just following their example. "Acknowledge," Marcus ordered. "Helm, Prepare for jump to faster than light. Follow the fleet. The stars stretched and twisted as the Vengeance engaged its drive. Around them, thousands of other ships did the same, vanishing from Earth orbit in flashes of bent space-time. Behind them, Earth continued turning, peaceful and blue. And somewhere in that darkness, the Vrix waited, still confident, still comfortable, still laughing about the weak primitives who filed protests instead of fighting. They would stop laughing soon. Marcus stared at the navigation display showing their course. 5 years of preparation. 5 years of building and training and hardening themselves for this moment. The Vrix thought they knew humanity. They thought humans were soft, civilized, bound by rules and mercy. They had forgotten to check humanity's history. They had forgotten to ask what humans did to their own species during thousands of years of warfare. They had forgotten that the species that could survive 2 world wars, that could split the atom and point it at themselves, that could look extinction in the face and spit at it, was not a species that forgave easily. The Vrix had started this war without knowing who they were fighting. They were about to find out. The Vrix listening post designated Delta 7 floated in the darkness between stars, monitoring the empty space of the outer territories. Its crew of 83 went about their duties with casual boredom. Nothing ever happened out here. The nearest inhabited system was 2 weeks away. This was punishment duty, a place where officers who had displeased their superiors were sent to rot. Commander Vrax stood on the bridge, watching the sensor displays show nothing but cosmic dust and distant starlight. He was thinking about requesting another transfer when the sensors screamed. "Contact!" the sensor operator shouted. Multiple ships dropping out of faster than light, bearing 270 distance. The operator's voice climbed higher. "Sir, I count over 300 vessels." Vrax rushed to the display. That was impossible. There was nothing in this sector. The nearest Vrix fleet was a week away. No other species had territory here. But the sensors didn't lie. Ships were appearing from nowhere, and they were all broadcasting the same identification signal. Human. The primitives? Vrax couldn't believe it. The humans barely had a fleet. They filed complaints and protests, but they didn't fight. Everyone knew that. What are they doing here? He never got his answer. The human ships opened fire from maximum range. Missiles crossed the distance in seconds. Delta 7's shields activated automatically, but the missiles weren't designed to penetrate shields. They detonated just before impact, releasing clouds of metallic particles that clung to the shield generators like a virus. The shields flickered and failed. The second wave of missiles had no shields to stop them. Delta 7 died in fire and silence. Vrax had just enough time to reach for the emergency beacon before the station came apart around him. The beacon activated automatically, screaming its warning to the nearest Vrix military base before the power failed forever. Aboard the destroyer Vengeance, Marcus Webb watched the target disintegrate on his tactical display. Target destroyed. No survivors detected. Confirmed, Lieutenant Osei said from weapons. She showed no emotion. None of them did anymore. All ships reporting successful engagement. 0 casualties on our side. Marcus nodded. Signal the fleet. Jump to the next target. The attack on Delta 7 was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, human forces struck at 17 Vrix outposts, 4 supply stations, and 2 mining colonies. Each attack followed the same pattern. Appear without warning. Overwhelm the defenses before they could react. Destroy everything, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. The Vrix scrambled to respond. But they were fighting an enemy that didn't follow the rules. Human ships jumped in from unexpected vectors. They used gravity wells and stellar phenomena to mask their approach. They attacked targets that seemed strategically worthless, forcing the Vrix to spread their defenses thin, trying to protect everything. And when Vrix warships finally caught up with the raiders, they discovered that humans fought like nothing they had ever encountered. The Battle of Helios Rift showed them what that meant. Captain Marcus Webb had taken his squadron of 8 destroyers deep into Vryk's territory, searching for targets of opportunity. What he found instead was a Vryk's hunter-killer group. 12 warships specifically tasked with hunting down the human raiders. They were faster and more heavily armed than his destroyers. In a straight fight, Marcus's squadron would be destroyed in minutes. Marcus didn't believe in straight fights. "Navigation, plot a course toward the Helios binary system," he ordered. His navigator looked confused. "Sir, that system's gravity well is highly unstable. The twin stars are collapsing toward each other. The tidal forces are exactly what we need. Helm, execute." The Vengeance and its squadron dove toward the dying stars with the Vryk's ships in pursuit. The Vryk's commander must have thought the humans were panicking, running blindly. He pushed his ships faster, closing the distance. By the time he realized the trap, it was too late. The binary star's gravity field created a region of twisted space-time that played havoc with ship sensors and navigation. Marcus had studied the phenomena for weeks, running simulations until he could navigate it blind. The Vryks, confident in their superior technology, charged straight in. 3 of their ships collided with each other when their navigation systems failed. 2 more were torn apart by gravitational shear forces they hadn't detected until too late. The remaining 7 ships scattered, trying to reorient themselves. Marcus's squadron circled back like sharks scenting blood. They targeted the disoriented Vryks vessels one by one, their weapons punching through shields that couldn't maintain proper coherence in the unstable gravity field. Within an hour, all 12 Vryk ships were destroyed or crippled beyond repair. Marcus didn't stay to confirm the kills. His squadron jumped away before any more Vryks forces could arrive, leaving only debris and a lesson. Humans were not prey. But it was the siege of Vryk Station Kappa 7 that truly shocked the galaxy. Station Kappa 7 was a fortress, designed to be impregnable. Its shields could withstand sustained bombardment from an entire fleet. Its weapons could track and destroy hundreds of targets simultaneously. 50,000 Vryk's military personnel staffed the station, with another 20,000 in the warships docked at its berths. Admiral Chen had assigned 400 ships to take it. Marcus commanded one of the assault groups. The human fleet arrived in 3 waves. The first wave launched every missile they had, saturating the station's defenses with thousands of targets. The Vryks shot most of them down, but enough got through to damage several shield generators. The second wave didn't bother with missiles. They were transport ships, cheap and expendable, loaded with Marines in powered armor. The transports charged straight at the station, their crews knowing they probably wouldn't survive. The Vryks' weapons tore apart most of the transports, but 17 reached the hull and magnetically locked on before being destroyed. The Marines inside were already cutting their way through the armor. The third wave was Marcus's squadron. They came in fast and low, using the station's own bulk to shield them from the defensive batteries. While the Vryks defenders tried to repel the boarders, Marcus's ships systematically destroyed the docking berths, trapping the Vryks warships before they could launch. Inside the station, the Marines fought a brutal close-quarters battle that lasted 3 days. The Vryks had never experienced boarding actions before. Their ships and stations weren't designed for internal defense. The Marines used that weakness, moving through the maintenance tunnels and life support systems, appearing where they shouldn't be able to exist. The Vryk soldiers were brave, but they were fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. The humans used demolition charges to seal corridors behind them, cutting the station into isolated sections. They used chemical weapons that were supposed to be banned by galactic law. They shut down life support to entire decks and let the defenders suffocate. On the 3rd day, the Vryks commander surrendered. Of the 50,000 defenders, less than 20,000 survived. The Marines had lost 8,000 dead, and twice that many wounded. By the standards of galactic warfare, The casualties were horrific. By human standards, it was acceptable. Chen arrived at the captured station personally. She walked through corridors still scarred by weapons fire, past bodies that hadn't been collected yet. She found Marcus in the command center, coordinating the cleanup operations. He looked exhausted, his armor scorched and damaged. "You held them," Chen said quietly. "We held them," Marcus corrected. He gestured to the Marines around them. "The survivors who had fought through hell to take this station. They're the ones who did it. I just pointed them at the target." Chen looked at the tactical displays, now showing human control codes instead of Vrix ones. "The Galactic Council is filing formal protests. They're calling our tactics barbaric, uncivilized, a violation of the accepted rules of warfare." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. The same council that did nothing when the Vrix massacred Kepler's Gate. The same council that called it an unfortunate incident. They can file all the protests they want. "They're afraid of us now," Chen said. "Good. Fear keeps you alive." News of Kappa 7's fall spread through the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time, the other species were forced to acknowledge that humanity was a genuine threat. The Vrix sovereignty, which had ruled its territory unchallenged for 3 centuries, was being pushed back by a species they had dismissed as primitives. But the greatest shock came from the recordings. The humans had broadcast the entire battle on every frequency, ensuring that anyone listening would hear it. They played recordings from Kepler's Gate, the screams of the dying colony, over the Vrix military channels. They showed images of the massacre to every Vrix soldier they captured. They made sure the enemy understood exactly why this was happening. The psychological effect was devastating. Vrix crews started to hesitate before engaging human forces. Some ships refused to fight at all, retreating rather than facing the furious humans. Morale across the Vrix military began to crumble. War Prime Zelthak watched the reports with growing anger. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to accept their place. They were supposed to be afraid. Instead, they were winning. He called an emergency meeting of his command staff. "How many ships have we lost?" 218 vessels destroyed or captured, his intelligence officer reported. "Another 300 damaged. We've lost 16 stations and 7 colonies. Human forces have penetrated to within 20 light-years of our core territories. And our counterattacks?" The officer hesitated. "We've destroyed 47 human ships, War Prime. But for every ship we destroy, they seem to build 3 more. They're not fighting to capture territory. They're fighting to bleed us." Zelthak stood and walked to the star map, dominating his command chamber. Red markers showed Vrix losses, spreading like a disease across his territory. He had started this war with casual cruelty, destroying Kepler's Gate because the humans had annoyed him. It had been a demonstration of power, nothing more. Now that demonstration was coming back to haunt him. "Assemble the Grand Armada," Zelthak ordered. "Pull ships from every sector. I want the largest fleet we've ever fielded. We're going to end this war the way we started it. We're going to destroy their homeworld." His officers exchanged worried glances. "War Prime, that will leave our territories virtually undefended. If we concentrate our forces, we won't need defenses when the humans are extinct," Zelthak interrupted. "They want war? We'll give them war. We'll burn Earth to ash and scatter its remains across the void. Then the galaxy will remember why the Vrix sovereignty is feared." He stared at the map, at the red markers showing his losses. The humans thought they could challenge him. They thought their anger gave them strength. He would teach them the price of defiance. "Send the orders," Zelthak commanded. "We march for Earth, and when we arrive, there will be no mercy. We'll do to them what we did to Kepler's Gate, but this time we'll make sure there are no survivors to remember." The orders went out across the Vrix sovereignty. Ships began to gather, pulled from every corner of their empire. The Grand Armada, the largest fleet the Vrix had assembled in a century, slowly took shape. On Earth, intelligence networks detected the movement. Warning sirens began to sound. The enemy was coming home. The warning came 3 weeks before the enemy arrived. Fleet Marshal Sarah Chen stood in Earth Defense Command, watching the holographic display update in real time as more intelligence reports came in. Each new report made the situation worse. The Vrix weren't sending a raiding force. They weren't sending a battle group. They were sending everything. Final count? She asked. Commander Park, older now and carrying scars from Kappa 7, consulted his datapad. 8,436 warships. They've stripped their entire empire. Every sector, every defensive fleet, all converging on a single target. He paused. Us. The command center had gone quiet. Everyone understood what those numbers meant. Earth's fleet had grown to 5,000 ships. They were outnumbered nearly 2 to 1, and the Vrix ships were individually more powerful. This wasn't a battle. This was an extermination. Time to arrival? Chen asked. 19 days. They're coming through the Kuiper Belt approach, straight down our throat. Chen stared at the tactical display showing Sol system. Earth, Mars, the asteroid belt, Jupiter's moons. 7 billion people on Earth alone. Another 3 billion scattered across the solar system, all of them depending on the fleet to protect them. Recall all forces, Chen ordered. Every ship, every station, everything we have. Send the civilian evacuation protocols. Get as many people off Earth as possible. Marshal, there's not enough time to evacuate. I know. Chen's voice was steel. But we try anyway. And we make them pay for every meter of space they take from us. Marcus Webb received the recall order while his squadron was raiding a Vrix supply depot near the frontier. He read it twice, not believing what he was seeing. Return to Earth. Maximum speed. Enemy fleet inbound. They're attacking Earth? Lieutenant Osei said, reading over his shoulder. With what? Everything. Marcus pulled up the intelligence estimate. When he saw the numbers, his blood went cold. They're coming to finish what they started. At Kepler's gate, he looked around his bridge. At the crew, who had followed him through 6 months of raids and battles. They had won every engagement. They had driven the Vrix back. And now, the enemy was going to bypass all of that and strike at their home. Navigation. Plot a direct course to Earth. Don't bother with the safe routes. We're going through the stellar debris field. His navigator paled. Sir, that will cut our travel time by a week, but the radiation will kill us slower than the Vrix will. Plot the course. The Vengeance and its squadron jumped toward Earth, racing against time. Around them, across 100 light-years of space, other human ships were doing the same. The hunters were being called home to become defenders. Earth prepared for war. The orbital factories that had been building warships for 5 years shifted to building weapons, platforms, and mines. The asteroid belt became one giant minefield, with thousands of automated weapon stations hidden among the rocks. Jupiter's moons were fortified and stocked with supplies for a long siege. Mars built bunkers deep underground and prepared to fight street by street if necessary. And on Earth, people looked up at the sky and wondered if they were seeing it for the last time. Chen divided her fleet into 3 defensive groups. The outer fleet, under Admiral Rodriguez, would meet the enemy at the Kuiper Belt. They knew they couldn't win, but they could slow the Vrix down, make them pay in blood for every astronomical unit they crossed. The middle fleet, commanded by Admiral Zhao, would defend the space between Jupiter and Mars. They had the asteroid field's weapons platforms to support them, giving them a fighting chance. And the inner fleet, the last line of defense, would guard Earth orbit. Chen would command that force herself from the flagship Remembrance. If the Vrix got past her, the war was over. Marcus and his squadron arrived 7 days before the enemy. His ships were damaged from their high-speed passage through the radiation field. 3 crew members had died from exposure. But they had made it home. Chen assigned Marcus's squadron to the inner fleet. "I need your experience here," she told him. "If it comes down to the last fight, I want someone who knows how to hurt them." "It won't come to that," Marcus said, though he didn't believe his own words. "Maybe not." Chen looked tired, like she hadn't slept in weeks. "But if it does, promise me you'll make them remember. Make them remember that they could have had peace, that we only wanted to be left alone. Make them remember that they chose this." Marcus promised. The Vrix Grand Armada arrived on schedule, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kuiper Belt, in a formation that stretched across millions of kilometers. They came in 3 massive waves, each one larger than the entire human fleet. War Prime Zelthak commanded from his flagship Domination, a vessel so large it could carry 1,000 fighters internally. He looked at the tactical display showing the human defensive positions and smiled. They had divided their forces, spreading themselves thin. They were making this easy. "All ships," he broadcast, "remember your orders. No mercy, no prisoners. We burn everything." The outer fleet met them first. Admiral Rodriguez had 2,000 ships and a determination to make every single one count. His forces were arranged in a spherical defensive formation around several large asteroids that had been hollowed out and filled with weapons. The Vrix saw the formation and dismissed it as primitive. They learned their mistake when the asteroids opened fire. The weapons weren't standard ship-mounted systems. They were converted mining lasers. Massive industrial tools designed to cut apart asteroids for ore extraction. Turned on warships, they punched through shields and armor like paper. 3 Vrix ships died in the opening salvo before they even knew they were under fire. The battle became chaos. The Vrix had numbers, but the asteroids restricted their ability to maneuver. Rodriguez's ships darted in and out, using the rocks for cover, firing and retreating before the enemy could retaliate. The Vrix admiral, frustrated by the harassment, ordered a full assault. His ships charged forward into a carefully prepared killing field. The asteroids exploded. Rodriguez had filled them with nuclear weapons. Thousands of warheads triggered simultaneously. The explosions tore through the Vrix formation, destroying hundreds of ships and scattering the survivors. The electromagnetic pulse from the detonations scrambled sensors and communications across the battlefield. In the confusion, Rodriguez's remaining ships attacked with everything they had: missiles, lasers, kinetic projectiles, even ramming attacks from ships that had nothing left to give. The battle lasted 14 hours and ended with the destruction of the entire outer fleet. But they had taken 600 Vrix ships with them, and they had delayed the enemy's advance by 3 days, while Zelthak regrouped. The Middle Fleet fought next. Admiral Zhao commanded from the carrier Defiant, named in honor of Sarah Chen's old ship. He had 2,000 ships and the entire asteroid belt's defensive network. The Vrix came at him with overwhelming force, determined not to repeat their mistakes. Zhao didn't fight them head-on. He used the asteroid field's sheer size, spreading his forces across millions of kilometers, forcing the Vrix to split up to engage him. Then he hit them piecemeal, concentrating his forces against isolated enemy groups before retreating into the asteroids. The Vrix pursued, trying to corner the defenders. They found mines instead. Thousands of them, painted to look like asteroids. The mines waited until enemy ships were in close proximity, then detonated in cascading chains that ripped apart entire formations. But the Vrix kept coming. They had the numbers to absorb the losses. They pushed forward relentlessly, accepting casualties that would have broken any other force. After 5 days of brutal fighting, Zhao's fleet was down to 300 ships. He sent a final message to Chen: "We've done all we can. Good luck." Then he ordered his remaining ships to form a wall of steel between the enemy and Mars. They died to the last ship, but they took another 900 Vrix vessels with them. Zelthak had started with 8,400 ships. Now he had less than 7,000. And he still hadn't reached Earth. The humans had hurt him, cost him more than any battle in Vrick's history. But he pushed on, driven by anger and pride. He had come here to destroy humanity's home. He would see it done. The inner fleet waited in Earth orbit, watching the enemy approach. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, looking at the tactical display. The Vrick's armada filled the screen, thousands of red icons moving toward her final defensive line. Behind her, Earth turned peacefully, blue and green and unaware of what was coming. All ships, she broadcast on the fleet-wide channel. This is our home. Our families are down there, depending on us. The Vrick's think they can destroy us. They think we'll break. They thought the same thing at Kepler's gate. She paused, letting that memory sink in. They were wrong then. They're wrong now. Today, we show them that humanity doesn't break. Today, we show them the price of attacking our home. All ships, engage at will. The final battle for Earth began. Marcus led his squadron straight at the enemy center, his weapons blazing. Around him, hundreds of other ships did the same. The Vrick's responded with their own fire, and space became a storm of energy and metal. The Hellstorm-class dreadnoughts anchored the defensive line, their massive guns tearing into the enemy formation. Each dreadnought was the equivalent of 20 normal warships, and they had 47 of them. They became the core of humanity's defense, islands of firepower that the Vrick's couldn't ignore. But the Vrick's had the numbers. For every ship they lost, another two moved forward. They pushed through the defensive line by sheer weight of numbers, accepting horrific casualties to get within range of their targets. Chen saw her fleet being ground down and made a decision. All ships, concentrate fire on their flagship. Target the domination. Everything we have, every human weapon in range, turned toward Zelthak's massive ship. Thousands of missiles, hundreds of energy beams, converged on a single target. The domination's shields flared and failed. Its armor buckled under the sustained assault. Zelthak ordered all power to weapons, determined to take as many humans as he could with him. Chen saw her opening. Marine assault teams, launch. Target the enemy flagship. The Remembrance opened its launch bays and released every boarding transport it had. The small ships raced toward the crippled domination, dodging defensive fire. Most were destroyed, but 3 made it through, crashing into the Vrick's flagship's hull and burning their way inside. Chen led the assault personally. She moved through the domination's corridors in powered armor, leading her Marines deeper into the enemy ship. They fought through Vrick's defenders room by room, leaving a trail of bodies behind them. Chen didn't care about casualties anymore. She only cared about reaching the bridge. She found Zelthak in his command center, surrounded by his personal guard. The War Prime was wounded, his ornate armor cracked and leaking. But he still stood, still fought. His guards died defending him. And then, it was just Chen and Zelthak, facing each other across the burning bridge. "You should have accepted your place," Zelthak said. "You should have been grateful we allowed you to exist." Chen raised her weapon. "You murdered 3 million people. You laughed while you did it. You called us primitives and insects." She fired once, the shot taking Zelthak in the chest. He fell, his eyes wide with disbelief. Chen stood over him as he died. "We're the insects that stung back." Outside, the battle raged for another 6 hours. The Vrick's fleet, leaderless and demoralized, began to retreat. Chen's surviving ships pursued them, harrying them all the way out of the solar system. Of the 7,000 ships that had reached Earth, less than 3,000 escaped. Earth's fleet had been reduced to 800 ships. When the last Vryek's vessel jumped away, Chen stood on her damaged bridge and looked at Earth below. The planet had survived. Humanity had survived. But the cost had been staggering. 20,000 dead in space, another 100,000 wounded, cities damaged by orbital debris, The scars would last for generations. Marcus brought his squadron back to Earth orbit. The Vengeance was barely functional, held together by emergency patches and prayers. He had lost half his crew, but they were alive, and Earth was safe. For now, Chen knew this wasn't over. The Vryks still existed. They were wounded, scattered, but not destroyed. And somewhere out there, other species were watching, learning from this battle. Humanity had proven they could defend themselves. Now, they had to prove they could finish what they'd started. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, humanity's surviving fleet prepared for its final offensive. Fleet Marshal Sarah Chen stood before the assembled captains in the briefing amphitheater aboard the rebuilt Remembrance. 800 ships had survived the defense of Earth. But in those 3 months, the factories had produced 300 more. Humanity was wounded but not broken. The holographic display showed a single star system deep in Vryks territory. Vryks Prime. The enemy homeworld. "This is where it ends," Chen said. Her voice carried no triumph, only exhausted determination. "The Vryks sovereignty is collapsing. Their military is scattered. Their government is in chaos. But as long as their homeworld remains untouched, they'll eventually recover. They'll rebuild. And they'll come back for us." Captain Marcus Webb sat in the front row, listening. His hair had gone gray at the temples despite being only 35 years old. War did that to people. "What are our orders, Marshal?" "We're going to Vryks Prime," Chen said. "We're going to surround their homeworld, and we're going to demand their surrender. Total, unconditional. War crimes trials for everyone involved in Kepler's Gate and the other massacres. Reparations for the families of the dead, and permanent demilitarization of the Vryks sovereignty." "And if they refuse?" another captain asked. Chen's expression hardened. "Then we do to them what they tried to do to us." The silence that followed was heavy. Every person in that room knew what she meant. Orbital bombardment. The extinction of an entire civilization. Genocide. "Marshal," Marcus said carefully, "if we do that, we become what they are." "I know." Chen looked at him, and Marcus saw the weight of that knowledge in her eyes. But Marcus heard the uncertainty in her voice. She was hoping, not certain. And hope was a dangerous thing to base military strategy on. The Galactic Council had been frantically trying to negotiate a peace settlement for months. Ambassadors from a dozen species had traveled to Earth, offering to mediate. Some genuinely wanted peace. Others just wanted the terrifying humans to stop fighting before they decided to attack someone else. Ambassador Okonkwo met with the Council representatives in Geneva. He listened to their proposals for ceasefire terms, for neutral arbitration, for gradual demilitarization, instead of total surrender. He listened politely, and then he said, "No." The lead counselor, a floating jellyfish-like being from the Crystalline Collective, pulsed with confusion. "You refuse all terms? But humanity has already won. The Vryks are defeated. Why continue the war?" "Because defeated is not the same as held accountable," Okonkwo replied. "The Vryks murdered millions of our people. When we asked for justice, you told us to accept our loss. You told us to be grateful the Vryks allowed us to exist. Now we're telling you, there will be justice, with or without the Council's approval. You're making a mistake," another ambassador warned. "The other species will not tolerate human aggression. If you attack Vryks Prime, then attack us." Okonkwo stood to leave. "If the Council believes the Vryks deserve protection, send your fleets to defend them. See how that works out." He paused at the door. "Or you could recognize that humanity tried peace. We tried asking nicely. The Vryks taught us that the galaxy respects only strength." The fleet departed Earth orbit 1 week later. 1,100 ships, carrying the fury of an entire species. They jumped through the void, crossing the distance to Vrix Prime in a series of calculated hops, each one bringing them closer to the heart of enemy territory. The Vrix military tried to stop them. Scattered defensive forces attacked the human fleet at 3 different star systems. Each time, the humans cut through them like a blade through paper. The Vrix ships were individually powerful, but their crews were demoralized, leaderless, and terrified of the humans who had destroyed their grand armada. By the time humanity's fleet reached Vrix Prime, there was almost nothing left to defend it. A few dozen warships, some planetary defense stations, and a population of 8 billion civilians who stared up at their sky in fear. Chen's fleet took up positions around the planet, their weapons aimed downward. Every major city, every military installation, every government building was locked in targeting computers. One word from Chen would turn the planet into a grave. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, looking at the planet below. It was beautiful, in its own way. Purple oceans, green continents, cities that glittered like jewels. Billions of people down there who had nothing to do with the massacre at Kepler's Gate. Children who didn't know why the humans had come. Families who just wanted to survive. Target locked, Lieutenant Osei reported. She had lost everyone at Kepler's Gate. If anyone deserved revenge, it was her. But her voice shook as she spoke. Waiting for firing authorization. Marcus didn't give it. Instead, he opened a channel to Chen's flagship. Marshal. Permission to speak freely. Granted. We can't do this, Marcus said. If we bombard that planet, we're no better than Zelthak. We're murderers. The same as them. They killed our people first, Chen replied. And that makes it right? We came here for justice, not revenge. There's a difference. I think that this man, and that makes it right. Chen was silent for a long moment. Then, what would you have me do, Marcus? Let them go unpunished? No. Make them surrender. Make them face trials. Make them rebuild under our supervision. But don't make us into the thing we've been fighting against. Before Chen could respond, the planetary government's communication request came through. The image of a Vrix official appeared on every screen in the fleet. He was old, his scales gray with age, and he looked utterly defeated. Human fleet, the official said. I am Prime Counselor Thexal. I speak for the Vrix sovereignty. He paused, struggling with the words. We surrender. Unconditionally. Your terms will be accepted. We ask only that you spare our people. They had no part in the decisions that led to this war. Chen stared at the transmission for a long moment. This was what she had come for. Total surrender. The Vrix on their knees, begging for mercy. 5 years of war, hundreds of thousands dead, all for this moment. Your surrender is accepted, Chen said finally. But there will be conditions. Every officer and official involved in the attack on Kepler's Gate and the other massacres will stand trial. Your military will be disbanded, and your ships will be surrendered to human custody. You will pay reparations to the families of those you murdered, and you will remain under human supervision until we are satisfied that you will never threaten another species again. Agreed, Thexal said immediately. All of it. Just, please, don't destroy our world. Chen closed the channel. She sat back in her command chair, suddenly looking older than her years. All ships, stand down from attack positions. Maintain blockade formation. Deploy landing forces to secure the government centers. Across the fleet, targeting systems deactivated. Weapons powered down. The destruction that had been seconds away from unleashing simply stopped. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Osei was crying silently at her station. Around the bridge, other crew members showed similar relief. They had won without becoming monsters. The occupation of Vrix Prime proceeded smoothly. The Vrix government, broken and leaderless, cooperated fully. They provided lists of everyone involved in the massacre at Kepler's Gate. They turned over military records, weapons, stockpiles, everything humanity demanded. The trials began 3 months later, broadcast across the galaxy. Former War Prime Zelthak couldn't stand trial, being dead, but dozens of his subordinates could. They sat in a courtroom on Vrykes Prime, watched by billions across hundreds of worlds, and faced judgment for their crimes. The proceedings took 6 months. Evidence was presented. Survivors testified. The Vrykes officers, to their credit, did not try to deny what they had done. Some showed remorse. Others remained defiant until the end. All were found guilty. The sentences ranged from life imprisonment to execution. The galaxy watched as humanity demonstrated they meant what they said about justice. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. But the trials were only the beginning. The Vrykes' sovereignty was broken into smaller, monitored zones. Their military was reduced to a token defense force. Human observers stationed themselves at every major Vrykes installation. The species that had once ruled 100 star systems was now a shadow of itself. Some called it harsh, others called it necessary. Humanity called it justice. The Galactic Council, watching all of this, finally granted humanity a permanent seat. The vote was unanimous. No one wanted to risk angering the species that had destroyed the Vrykes' sovereignty. Humanity was now officially a major power, respected and feared in equal measure. 1 year after the war ended, Sarah Chen stood at the memorial on Earth. The names of everyone who had died at Kepler's Gate were carved into a black stone wall that stretched for kilometers. 3.2 million names. She came here every anniversary, reading as many as she could, trying to remember that all of this had started because these people had been murdered. Marcus joined her, standing silently beside her. He wore civilian clothes now, having resigned his commission. He couldn't be a soldier anymore. The things he had seen, the things he had done, they stayed with him every night, in his dreams. "Do you think it was worth it?" Marcus asked quietly. Chen didn't answer immediately. She thought about the dead. Hundreds of thousands of humans who had died in the war. Millions of Vrykes who had lost their lives. The civilians caught in the crossfire. The children who would grow up without parents on both sides. "I don't know," she admitted, finally. "We got justice. We proved humanity couldn't be exterminated, without consequences. But the cost," she gestured at the memorial wall. "Was justice worth all these lives?" "I don't have an answer. Maybe there isn't one," Marcus said. "Maybe we just did what we had to do, and have to live with it." Above them, the sky was clear and blue. But Marcus knew that in orbit, the Battlefleet remained. Humanity had demobilized most of its wartime forces, but enough ships remained to remind the galaxy. Humanity remembered. Humanity did not forgive easily. And humanity would never again be caught unprepared. The fleet was a promise and a warning. Never again would humanity be victims. Never again would they stand by while others were massacred. The galaxy had learned what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. Some species looked at the human fleet and saw aggression. Others saw protection. Earth's former colonies, rebuilt and thriving, saw guardians. The smaller species, watching from the shadows, saw hope that bullies could be stopped. Chen turned away from the memorial. "I'm retiring," she said suddenly. "The council wants me to stay on as an advisor, but I can't anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of the people who died under my command. I need to find some kind of peace." "Good luck with that," Marcus said. "Let me know if you figure out how." They walked together back toward the transport station. Two people who had survived a war but couldn't escape what they had become. Behind them, the memorial stood silent, a reminder of why they had fought and what they had lost. In the decades that followed, humanity's role in the galaxy continued to evolve. They built alliances with the smaller species, offering protection in exchange for cooperation. They established trade networks and cultural exchanges. Slowly, carefully, they worked to become more than just the species that had destroyed the Vrix. But they never forgot. Every ship in the human fleet bore the names of those lost at Kepler's Gate. Every officer took an oath to remember why the fleet existed. And once a year, on the anniversary of the massacre, every human ship in the galaxy observed a moment of silence. The Vrix, diminished but not destroyed, eventually recovered some of their dignity. Under human supervision, they rebuilt their society with a new understanding of their place in the galaxy. The younger generation, growing up in the post-war era, looked at their elders' crimes with shame. They worked to make amends, to prove they were more than their worst actions. Some wounds healed. Others never would. Marcus eventually found a kind of peace. He became a teacher again, this time at the Human Naval Academy, training the next generation of officers. He told them about the war, about the price of victory, about the importance of never becoming the thing you fight against. His students listened, and they learned. Chen never found her peace. She died 10 years after the war ended, her nightmares finally catching up with her. But she died, knowing that humanity had survived, that the species that had tried to exterminate them had faced justice, that the galaxy would never again dismiss humanity as weak or insignificant. At her funeral, Marcus delivered the eulogy. He spoke of a woman who had carried the weight of billions on her shoulders, who had made impossible choices, who had led humanity through its darkest hour and emerged victorious, even if that victory left scars. She did what had to be done, Marcus said, and she paid the price so the rest of us wouldn't have to. The fleet performed a flyover during the ceremony. Thousands of ships passed overhead in formation, blocking out the sun for 5 full minutes. It was the largest gathering of human warships since the war ended. A final salute to the woman who had built them and led them to victory. As the last ship passed and the sun returned, Marcus looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, beyond Earth's atmosphere, beyond the solar system, beyond the boundaries of human space, the galaxy continued its endless turning. New conflicts arose. New species made their first tentative steps into the void. The cycle continued. But the galaxy remembered. They remembered Kepler's Gate. They remembered the war that followed. They remembered what happened when humanity was pushed too far. And they remembered the fleet that had marched across the stars, bringing fire and justice in equal measure. The humans had proven their point. They could not be exterminated without consequence. They would not accept being victims, and they would never, ever, forget the price that had been paid. The sky of Battlefleet remained a monument and a warning, a promise and a threat, and humanity watched the stars, ready to defend their place among them. They had marched with a sky of Battlefleet once. They would do so again, if necessary. But they hoped, with everything they had, that it would never be necessary again. The war was over. The reckoning was complete. Now came the harder part, living with what they had done, and trying to build something better from the ashes. Time would tell if they succeeded.